Okay, let's see. Welcome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Implementing and Supporting Blended Learning, uh, being presented by Tina Height. My name is Kristen Waring, and I will be moderating the webinar today. So before we begin, please go to signin@nmdelt.org and fill out the attached form. You can also see that link in the chat on the right side of your screen. This will verify your attendance at our seminar, at our webinar today. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the chat on the right side of your screen. I will consolidate them, and at the end of the presentation, we will have an opportunity to ask that of our presenter. If you're not watching this live, please disregard this message. And now I will turn the mic over to Tina Height.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to talk today about implementing and supporting distance or blended learning, keeping in mind that we're trying to do this in 30 minutes. So it's an overview. And before we even start, I'm going to turn on something I just learned about at the COABE conference, which is down here where I can turn on closed captioning. So this is for the hearing impaired and keeps us compliant with accessibility. And notice that it is typing exactly what I'm saying. Is that amazing or what? All right. So if you haven't already done so, I created a very short blended learning survey to let us know if your program's already using blended learning as a method of delivering instruction. It's 3 questions. If you haven't already done that, please take some time to do so. Kristen is also going to paste this link into the chat box so that you don't have to remember all of those letters. I'm sure I would get it wrong typing it in. Or if you are on the director's listserv, that should be in your email as well. So the first place to start is with our state policy. So for our state policy, for the purposes of defining who is a distance learner, programs track students as distance learners if at least 50% of the instructional hours scheduled for a given class are to be derived from proxy hours. For the purposes of this policy, blended learning students will follow the same policies as distance learners. So if you have a class that meets 2 days a week, a total of 5 hours, for example, then the students have additional work where it's not homework, but it is learning new skills, whether you're doing that as a flipped class or as additional work to enhance their skills, but they're to advance their skills. There are lots of ways of dealing with that, but that's what's classified under the distance learning, and you can count those proxy hours. We're going to be working on that policy some more, but right now that's what our policy is. So that's what we're talking about when we say blended learning, is that you are intentionally having some distance component to your class that is outside of what would be considered regular homework. So a couple of really, really good resources. The Ideal Distance Learning Handbook at Distance Education and Blended Learning Handbook is available to anyone freely at edtech.worlded.org. It's in their resources. And this came from Project Ideal. Some of you may remember that this was something organized way back in 2002, way back, by Dr. Jerry Johnston. And he saw that adult educators were starting to look at distance learning as a way of reaching students, that more and more adult ed students had computers or access at home, and how could we convince federal people that this was a viable solution for our students, and could we count those hours? We've been counting hours for a long time in adult ed towards instructional hours. So under his leadership, he brought together a consortium of states that did some pilot projects, that researched this, and helped develop or shape that distance learning policy. So I was actually in the room the day we decided, at the federal level, well, how do you classify a distance learner? At what point do you say they're not a classroom learner anymore, they're a distance learner? And it was thoughtful, but somewhat arbitrary, where we came up with okay, if it's over 50%, we think we should count them as a distance learner. So it's worked for a while, but it's something I think we need to revisit. The handbook has been through, now I've forgotten, this is, I believe, the 6th edition. So it's gone through several editions, revised and improved every time. But Jerry Johnston retired in 2015, and World Ed took over the project. So Jennifer Vanek leads that project and has helped with the 6th edition, where it says right on the slide that this is the 6th edition. So this is, again, a great resource. Goes through step by step, how do you do this in your program? Great. Another wonderful resource for blended learning is a links resource, or you can also get it on David Rosen's site, which is Essential Learning. But I've given you the link to the links resource, and it's Blended Learning for the Adult Education Classroom by David Rosen. This is really a teacher's guide to distance learning. So this is something that will help your instructors understand what they're doing, help them along the way. Of course, with help from the DELT team, we're always here to support you. But we wanted to look a little bit at who's on the internet. So if you look at this chart, way back here in 2002, when we were just getting started in distance learning, about 75% of those 18 to 29 years old were using the internet. If you look now in 2018, you can't see it on here, but when I look at it online, this is 99% of those students from 18 to 29, or adults 18 to 29, are using the internet. The next age group, the 30 to 49, are almost as high. So the people we serve, our primary population, close to 99% of them are using the internet. Though there are some other factors, right? So then what about income? How does income affect who's using the internet? Well, you can see those who are making less than 30,000, which are most of our students, fewer of those are actually using the internet. So we're getting down less than 75%. Okay. And if they have less than a high school education, that number drops even further. So not all of our students are using the internet. I would like to see how this overlaps, right? If 99% of those under the age of, I forgot my age groups now, but under the age of 54 are using the internet, but it's also impacted by education and now I have to go back to my previous slide, by income and also by whether or not they're in a rural community. So a lot of the students that we serve at UNM Valencia live in rural areas where their access is limited. So, based on this research, how do we reach those students? What are the barriers? So this is something that I would like to get some input on. If you have challenges for reaching your students, I would like you either to ask a question by going to this website, or you can type it into your chat. Either way, but tell us about what are some of the challenges that your student population has accessing the internet. While I'm waiting on those, there are a few challenges that we've had, and these are general challenges. I shouldn't have limited it to the students accessing the internet, but some of the challenges that we've faced or that we've heard are, how do you count those hours? There are programs, of course, that count the time for us, but how do you report those? The student access to the internet is a big challenge for blended learning. How do you train and support your instructors? And then how do you pay instructors? We're used to paying them for class time and some for prep time. But if they're expected to do extra work and have extra assignments that are outside of the time that they're with the students, how do you compensate them in a fair and equitable way? Okay, Kristen, I am not seeing any questions.
Tina, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. That the questionnaire is not working.
The questionnaire is not working.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Are we getting any questions in the chat?
No.
Okay. So
Not yet.
I'm going to assume that everyone has the same challenges that I do. And I was going to use this tool again later in the presentation, but I'm going to turn it off.
So one of the challenges that I have is that the students just don't have the income to pay for their own internet.
Right, and so that in general is access to internet, whether it's them having internet at home or getting to a place that has internet, right? We can say, well, we have internet at our program, but if it's a distance for them to drive, that can be a problem for them. So what do we do about that? Let me move on to our, whoops. Our next, well, I thought I had a next slide that's not in here. But how would you respond to these challenges? Do we have any thoughts from the participants? When you're faced with, how do students access the internet outside of your program? How do you provide them resources? Okay, so I'm going to give some information based on our experience, and Kristen, you have experience with this as well, so please feel free to chime in. So just counting hours, there are several ways of doing that, and they are listed in our distance learning policy. We always put any of those hours that happen outside of class into LACES as computer hours and they are instructional hours. If they are homework hours, we do also put them in LACES as homework hours, and they are non-instructional. But we try to account for all of the hours that students are engaged in our program, whether or not they count officially for NRS. So that's up to your program and how you want to track that. That is our preference, to know what our students are doing and how much time they really are spending in learning activities. We use programs like Edmentum's Plato, EdReady. Kristen, help me.
I use typing.com. I really like that. It has a tracking system in there as well. For keyboarding skills, we use Google Classroom a lot.
But that doesn't track time.
That
So
doesn't
which
track
other ones
time.
do we use that
We
track
use
time?
we use Career Ready 101 or the new WorkKeys curriculum program, which I don't know if it's been launched for everyone yet, but it will be soon.
Okay, great. So there are those kinds of programs that we support that have that time clock built in. So counting hours is really easy. And then Kristen mentioned Google Classroom. So when you're making assignments for them to do on their own, because maybe you have a reading and an essay you want them to write, or you want them to watch a video and respond to that, then you can do, I'm in trouble now. I've forgotten what it's called, but you can do teacher time. So as long as it is standardized, or you can do mastery time, right? They've mastered a subject. So based on some research, you can count those hours. And if you need assistance with that, members of the DELT team can help you with that kind of technical assistance to see how you can count their hours. The other thing, just from a personal space, we have started focusing more on progress than attendance. So it is much more important to us that students are showing improvement rather than trying to account for every single hour they are participating. And in the beginning, from 2002 to 2015, when we offered distance or blended learning, we were not able to count those hours, but we still did so because we thought it was a good method and it helped students increase their progress. I'm sorry, not enough coffee this morning, or too much. And what about access to the internet? So I'm thinking in two different terms. How do you help them access the internet if they can't afford to get it at home, or they live in a rural area and it's not even a possibility for them to get internet at home? Are there any ideas on how you would help those students?
One of the things that we use in our program is that everyoneon.org, and that is designed for low-income rural people. You put in your zip code, and it gives you internet deals in your area, some of them as low as $10 a month, which is much more doable for our students than $60 or $70 a month.
And they can find access to low-cost equipment as well.
That's correct.
And we've been using Chromebooks in our program, mostly with the ACE program, but we've just recently started with our adult ed program as well. They are very low cost. Students can pick one up from anywhere from, what do you think, Kristen, $100 to $200?
Usually in between that area, yes.
Yeah. The ones we purchased for the program were just over $200. So they're inexpensive. And our students can access just about everything they need to on a Chromebook. So that's something. Internet access at some of the free Wi-Fi hotspots. which include public libraries. We have students who will sit out in the parking lot, either at UNM Valencia or of their children's school, to access the Wi-Fi. So most public schools and universities have free Wi-Fi.
And
where else, Kristen?
Don't forget, McDonald's and Burger King are great. They have free internet at all of their sites. So if your students have children, they can go sit in the play area and let their kids play while they do their homework.
It's a great suggestion.
Usually libraries have it. Starbucks, if there's a Starbucks available, always has free Wi-Fi. And I just tell my students to ask if they're at a restaurant or something like that. Usually most restaurants will have some sort of free Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
One thing that I did recently notice or find out about is I knew the city of Los Lunas had a citywide hotspot set up, but Albuquerque also has a citywide hotspot. So something you might ask at your, I don't know, maybe your Chamber of Commerce, something like that, to see if they have a citywide hotspot set up in your area.
And some of the other things that we're seeing is that more and more people are moving away from broadband internet and are only accessing internet on their smartphones. So we've been talking with Edmentum for quite some time. A lot of their curriculum is now available on the cell phone. It's accessible. EdReady is working on that as well. So there are things that they can do. Most Google Classroom and Google Docs, all available on their smartphone. So it's another way that they can actually access the internet. And we do have instances where our students are rural, that really they have no cell phone access at home and they really want to work. Some of the programs like EdReady also have print materials. EdReady and Career Ready 101 are the two that I know of, that the print materials are easily accessible, so you can print things out for them to take home. They can work on those and then come back and do the assessments when they have internet access. So distance learning does not always have to involve the internet, or blended learning does not always have to involve the internet. However, quite often what we do when they do those lessons at home, in order for us to have an auditable record of what they've done, we scan them and upload them to Google Classroom as an assignment, so it's in their electronic portfolio. So we do want to make sure that we have the support that says the student has actually done this work, if we're counting hours for that. Training and supporting instructors. So NMDELT is a great resource. We will help you, as well as the resources previously mentioned, the Ideal Distance and Blended Learning Handbook, as well as David Rosen's Blended Learning Guide for instructors. And then how to pay instructors. That can get very complicated. And Kristen can tell you, especially, she was one of our guinea pigs, that in doing distance learning with someone other than a full-time instructor who was exempt, right? And so we had the flexibility of scheduling. But when I was paying a part-time instructor to provide blended learning, how do we do that? How do we figure out what is a reasonable amount of compensation for somebody who is doing that off-site and spending time at home, connecting with students, because we do use Google Hangouts or Google Classroom for them to communicate with the instructor as well. So they're doing that at time away from the campus. They're helping them with homework. They're reviewing records, either in EdReady Career Ready 101 or any of the other programs that they're using. So there is more work involved for the teacher. How do you compensate for that? My first suggestion would be to look at, if you are part of a community college, look at what they are doing for their online instructors. Talk with your administration and see if you can work out something that's reasonable. I'm, of course, happy to talk with you about how we've worked out that system, but we want you to follow your campus policies and procedures, and then we can support that as well. And I want to move on to the next slide. So, Distance Learning 101. Once upon a time, we did have a Distance Learning 101 course, and it was required way back in that 2002 to 2000. Gosh, I'm trying to remember, maybe 2008 was when we stopped doing that, but it was required that every program that wanted to do distance learning in New Mexico had to go through this Distance Learning 101 course. When it quit being required, we quit offering it. And so the survey that I sent out this morning that I've asked you to complete is to see if there is an interest in bringing that back. It is a guided course to help you design your program, to make sure you've looked at all of the components that are required to do distance or blended learning. What is it you're trying to accomplish with that? Do you want to just increase your access? Do you need to increase intensity? Do you want to reach a community that's otherwise been unreachable? And who's going to teach it, how to teach it, how to use the resources that are available to you, how to measure your outcomes from blended learning. So this would be a community course. We would probably start it in August, but I just want to measure interest. And when I looked at the results just before the webinar, it looks like about, well, everyone said that responded, said that they at least might be interested. There were more maybes than yes, I definitely am interested. So maybe that just means I need to send some more information out. But we will look at presenting this course if there's enough interest. So if this is something you'd like to do, please let me know, and we will offer the course in the fall. So, unless there are any questions, that is the end of the presentation. Feel free to contact me. Here's my information. And you can hang out with me like the adult ed people who attended the NROC meeting did. So you've got a whole bunch of people. OTAN was there from California. We had North Carolina represented, Hawaii. Gosh, Kristen, help me out. What other states were there?
Oh, New York was there.
Can see some of our New Mexico people in there.
Oh yeah,
We had a good
I don't remember where all these people are from. There were so many of them.
We have a good crowd that's participating in the NROC membership and helping to build better tools for adult education.
Did you say California?
I did.
Okay.
So the woman up front is Nettie from OTAN in California. And there's Jamie right behind her and Cash next to her.
I see Dawn in the back there, or kind of the middle.
Kristen, do we have any questions coming in?
The only question we had was, are you going to share all of these links to the resources with the people that were in the presentation today?
Yes, and this presentation is being recorded as we speak, and the link is going to be active So you can come back to the presentation, see it again, and we can send out all of the links as a separate resource. So I will definitely do that.
All right. Well, Tina, I think you did such a wonderful job that there are not any more questions at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you all for attending today. But before we end, I have a couple of announcements. So make sure that you join us on the NMDELT website for our monthly ELL webinars, and also for our monthly tech talks usually with Terry. I don't have a schedule for the next tech talk yet, but the next monthly ELL webinar is with Monse, Dawn, and Jamie on Wednesday, April 17th at 12:30. This will be the third in our spring series of webinars, and it will be called Practice and Conclusion, Tech Strategies that Reinforce English Learning. Don't forget, if you have not signed in, go to signin@nmdelt.org.
Kristen,
signin.nmdelt.org, pardon me. And just give us your information so that we can make sure if you need it that you get credit for being here. And make sure you join us on the next hour. All of our webinars today will be set up on the hour. So our next webinar will be at 10 o'clock. And we hope to see you there. Thank you very much.